Welcome back, everyone. In this new topic, we'll be taking a jump away from traits and we'll be talking about needs. Needs differ from traits in that they are a requirement for survival or well-being and are more universal than traits. Again, these are supposed to be things that everyone requires versus being just personality traits that where people might defer in them in some way, maybe have some motivations that other people don't have. Um, but yeah, these needs are things that are important for everyone. Of course, there will still be some individual differences based on things like the environment and what is needed at that time. Um, but it's not similar to, or it's not the same as traits in a sense where, someone can either have extroversion or not have that trait. These are things that everyone needs. And so we'll split this into three videos again. In this first one, we'll talk a little bit about what needs are in terms of differentiating them and expanding on instincts. And we'll talk about kind of a bit of an older way of going about measuring needs. And then the second two videos will be going over the prioritization of needs. And then finally, some newer theory or newer needs based on research, which are those psychological needs. So again, basing this off of instincts. So needs have been researched for quite some time and started off with research about instincts. McDougall had a large role in at least transitioning research of instincts from just animals to humans as well. But an instinct is conceptualized as an internal stimulus that pushes behavior. So again, not this external thing from an environment, something internal inside of you that pushes you. There are quite a few examples with animals. I feel like, honestly, when we usually think about instincts, or at least when I usually think about animals. So examples are birds just instinctually fly, animals like lions instinctually hunt. There's some very interesting research done by Konrad Lorenz emphasizing this imprinting or attachment instinct that geese have. So basically, check out this video. The general synopsis is that these geese are just have this instinct to imprint on their mother, right? So in other words, they'll just right as they hatch, just begin to fall around that mother everywhere, which from an evolution, an adaptation standpoint makes sense. But in Lorenz's research, he actually split them into conditions. And in one condition, these eggs were hatched in an incubator rather than with mom. And so they ended up following Lorenz around, actually, as opposed to the mom, the idea being that they actually imprinted on Lorenz's boots. Problem with just translating this to humans is that it doesn't explain a whole lot. So for an example, if we're going to use violent behavior from an instinct standpoint, the description would just be, oh, we do that because it's just an innate thing. That's just biologically, there's an internal stimulus that pushes us towards this behavior, but that's it, explanation wise. And so that is where needs kind of come in. The research on needs is to take instincts and that internal stimulus and behavior or push and explain why that is functional. And so needs are enduring characteristics or motives from within the person. So like instincts, they are still, needs are still an internal push. However, going farther than instincts, needs are essential requirements for health survival, happiness, well-being. And so, in other words, this is a way of defining or explaining the purpose of needs, termed red integration. Our needs are activated by environmental stimuli. So again, they are internal pushes, but they are activated by the environment. So an example of this would be we have this internal need to consume calories, for energy and just life and survival. And so, but that, however, is activated by the environment as well. So hunger, the example is hunger is aroused by smelling freshly baked bread or cookies or, whatever you think smells good. So there's been some pretty interesting ways of going about measuring needs and what certain individuals needs are as opposed to others. One way of getting at this is the TAT, or the thematic apperception test. That's kind of a mouthful. So TAT it is. Maybe you've heard, there are a few projection tests out there. The TAT is one of them. Maybe you've heard of the Rorschach inkblot test, which is kind of a similar idea. But in this TAT created by Murray, basically the experimenter or the clinician, whoever it might be, instructs the individual to look at a picture or a series of pictures, and then for each come up with a story. So, things like, what are the people in this picture thinking? What is happening? What are their motives? Things like that are the goal, trying to get the individual to go about answering these types of things. Although the experimenters or clinicians are supposed to give a very limited amount of instruction for these in order to, not guide or lead the people participating in a certain direction. So there are a few examples of these pictures. A lot of them are maybe a little bit strange. So for this one, try and think about, what you think might be going on here. Maybe give this lecture video a quick pause and think about the story you could come up with for this image. I'll jump into some common answers here. It might be that this is an older woman who is reminiscing on her younger days and maybe regretting the things that she didn't do. Also commonly, you could get the flip side of that, where it's a younger woman thinking about aging and is maybe a little bit scared about that. Another example of a very common or well-known TAT image is this one here. So yeah, pause again. Think about what kind of a story you might come up with for this. Some common ones are she maybe killed him, or maybe she's thinking about leaving him and is upset about that, or potentially he came home from the bars and passed out drunk. Yeah. So types of needs. Tests like the TAT are used to try and classify an individual's needs, right? And figure out what is on their minds in order to try and get at what is internally pushing them, what they need. And so, and again, they normally see quite a few of those pictures and come up with stories for those. So then the idea from the clinician or experimenter point of view is to take away themes from all of the stories that the individual comes up with, and then classify them into what might be that person's chronic motives or needs. So an example, if an individual is talking about relationships in a lot of these pictures, and that could be taken away as having a need or chronic motivation for belongingness. So there are various ways of classifying needs. The first is primary versus secondary, or viscerogenic versus psychogenic. Those primary needs are more physiological things that are needed for survival. So food, water, shelter, things like that, versus secondary or psychogenic needs are more psychological, and we'll talk about those quite a bit more, especially in the third video. So achievement, belonging, things of that nature. We can also classify needs into approach versus avoidance needs. So we want to approach various things that we need for survival, like water, food, versus we want to avoid things that will end our survival, avoid harms like, if you want to approach water, maybe you still want to avoid some crazy river that has too strong of a current that's going to take you away. We can finally classify needs in terms of latent and manifest needs, or conscious versus unconscious. So those manifest needs are needs that we are personally aware of. Like I'm sitting here right now and I know that I should drink some water, versus those latent needs are more unconscious and beneath the surface, and we might not know that we need those things. All right, so next we'll talk about the prioritization of needs, and maybe go over certain hierarchies in terms of what might come first in terms of needs, and then if we are able to obtain those certain needs, what comes next, and so on and so forth.